Welcome to the Scrutiny meeting this afternoon. Like you say, because we've got people that we might not know each other.
We can't hear you, Chair.
Start again. Welcome to our Scrutiny meeting. There's some new people that we might not know by name, so I'd like to do the introductions. My name is Terry Hennigan. I represent Penderry Ward.
My name is Michelle Roberts and I'm the Scrutiny Officer.
Alan Jeffrey here, representing Uplands Ward, Councillor.
Cheryl Philpott representing Scrutiny. Julie Davis, Head of Child and Family in the Council.
Jane Whitmore, Strategic Lead Commissioner for Swansea Council.
Healy Gwilym, Cabinet Member for Community Support. Hayley Griffiths, ASB Manager, South Wales Police.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chief Inspector Mark Breyer. I've got a couple of hats today. I'm the BCU Head of Community Safety for Swansea and East Port Talbot, but I'm also the Antisocial Behaviour Lead for South Wales Police.
Shall I get people to introduce online? That's okay. If you'd like to introduce yourself online, shall I start with Councillor Pugh?
Yes, hi, Councillor. I'm Councillor Alison Pugh. I'm the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, and ASB sits within my remit. Thank you.
Councillor Mike Day?
Hi, I'm Councillor Mike Day, one of the Scrutiny councillors.
Bridget Rowlands?
Hello, I'm Bridget Rowlands and one of the councillors for the Clydach Ward.
Mark Tribe?
Good afternoon all, Mark Tribe representing Llangefellach and Velindre.
Mary Jones?
Good afternoon, I'm one of the councillors that represents Dunvant and Calais Ward.
Rebecca Fogarty?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Fogarty, one of the councillors.
And Sam Bennett?
Hi, I'm Sam Bennett. I'm the councillor for the Waterfront Ward.
And Adam Davis?
Hello, I'm Adam Davis. I'm one of the councillors for Llwca Ward.
Victoria Holland?
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm the councillor for Pontley and Teacride.
And I think we have, was there one more person? Yvonne Jardine.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Jardine, one of the councillors for Morriston Ward.
We also have Paul Thomas here if he wants to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Community Integration and Partnership Manager for Swansea Council.
And Gareth Pritchard.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gareth Pritchard, I'm the Social Behaviour Reduction Coordinator for Swansea Council.
No. I think that's everyone. In case I've missed anyone out. No.
Okay, can we start with apologies, please? I've already got Hazel Morris, who is in hospital, sadly, and Matthew Jones. Any other apologies? I want to disclose in the personal and prejudicial interest. Any? No. What about prohibited whip votes and declaration of party whips? Yep. Okay, minutes of the last meeting. Page 1. Page 2. I'm looking for two correct records of the minutes.
Move. Mike Day.
Thank you. Yes. I do matters arise. Any matters arising from the minutes?
Really, it was a very long meeting, and the minutes a very short summary. I'm guessing that Michelle would have captured all the points to be included in the final report.
Yeah, we'll be doing putting them all together. So I've done notes, detailed notes from each meeting that's over and above the reports, and they'll be put together in your final findings report to consider.
Thank you.
don't think there's any public questions. No, okay. So we go to item 6, which is the police community policing. Mark Breyer and Hayley Griffiths. Would you like to kickstart then, please?
Well, good afternoon. I think you would have, hopefully you've had a copy of the report that we sent to you. And I hope you've all read it in some detail. If you like, I'll give you just a very brief summary of our activities and what we do, and then I can open it out to questions if you like, because basically I think that would be probably a better way to manage this. So the role of the police. So this is to look at the partnership and to look at how the police integrate in the partnership and integrate with the local authority. I'll say from the outset that since I've been in the BCU, which is now over 7 or 8 years, in a role as a Chief Inspector Operations and as a role within, and in fact, temporary super head of the partnerships, and also back now as Community Safety Chief Inspector, there's been some very good and close work, closely knit working arrangements with the local authority with respect to how they manage themselves, how we manage ourselves, and how we integrate on a day-to-day basis. Now, just to give you a little framework, a bit of a structure here, I run the community safety department in Neath, Port Talbot and Swansea, and sitting in my remit is antisocial behaviour. And working for me, I've got a number of BCU coordinators, and their job is to have an overarching view, if you like, a highlight of ASB in Swansea and Neath, and to make sure that we're actively looking at individuals, actively looking at locations, actively looking at areas of interest where antisocial behaviour is causing an issue for the community and indeed for us. And their job is to highlight that, and with the assistance of the local authority and with the assistance of the wider neighbourhood teams that we have, is to come up with initiatives and operations that deal with antisocial behaviour on a specific location basis, but also to look at individuals particularly who we then interact with on how we deal with antisocial behaviour. So basically, I've got a kind of a view of the whole of the BCU. What I've also got a view of, which is a benefit really, is the whole of the force. Because where I sit, I can see the issues in Cardiff, I can see the issues in Bridgend, and I can compare and contrast about how we're doing in other areas. And what I'll say from the outset now, for Swansea, we're no real different from any city of a normal size. We haven't got any real issues that are an outlier from what we have for antisocial behaviour. What I will say is, I think we've got some real challenges in some of the issues we've seen. For instance, coming out of the pandemic, if you like, and the issues we saw in SA1, we got some challenges with the beachfront. We got some challenges in some green spaces. And I think our focus, or our focus as a team with the local authority, is looking at youth intervention. So I've got a kind of a view of that, and also nationally, we're plugged in nationally, not just within the Welsh network, but also within the UK, around different forces, what best practice is, how you deal with antisocial behaviour and the like. But I think just to give you a flavour of our activity then, and it's probably I'm just very briefly answering the first question that's in the paperwork, is that our intervention focuses not just on enforcement for antisocial behaviour. It focuses on intervention, and it focuses on a staged approach to deal with individuals who, in the first instance, we believe need our help and need some intervention with respect to their parental family support networks, first and third sector for youth involvement and diversion and issues like that. So we take people through a staged process, 1 through 3, with antisocial behaviour contracts if we need to get them, all the way through the raft of antisocial behaviour legislation, all the way through to what I probably want to term the hard end of the work, which is looking at criminal behaviour, orders, and the real side of that is real enforcement and the strong arm, if you like. And I think the test here for me is looking. If you may have seen it in the paperwork that I gave to you, the test here is about what the drop-off rate is. So from the initial intervention with our youth at stage 1, or the initial intervention before then with initial contact, the stage 1 issues when we intervene there, how many do we take all the way through to the end of that spectrum, if you like. So does it work at the front end is the question. And like I said before, we're not an outlier in the force here. In Swansea, I think it's sitting around 63%, 70% or so of the people that we intervene in the first instance do not progress anywhere else, which is a really good thing. Nationally and even force-wide, it's exactly the same, similar type of figures. So it kind of, the data kind of tells me that we are doing some issues, we are gripping some issues right. And the first impact, isn't it? The first impact is the letter we send to the parents. This is just about youth ASB, obviously, is the letter we send to the parents. The parents have a good influence over their children and their young people, and the behaviour stops. Obviously, for some, it continues. And then we have to put interventions in place with partnership with Gareth Pritchard's team, with the youth service, and even with some elements of youth justice to ensure that we wrap around individuals and families to make sure we offer them the most support as a partnership. And I think that is the approach in a nutshell. But it doesn't stop there, though, does it? Because it also says that we've got areas in your constituent areas that you're responsible for, and areas that we've got to target harden. We've got to do a lot of crime prevention issues in them areas. Penderry Ward, sir, you know, with off-road bikes and the like, and even on the seafront here with the youths, where we've got to work hard from an operational point of view to put stuff in place to ensure that we're visible and we're proactive in preventing things occurring in the first instance. And I think the other thing I'd like to say, I know my colleagues from the council agree with me, is that I think the partnership in the last 20 years has kind of, I think the whole approach nationally has kind of grown up a bit, in that we look at the issues from a problem solving approach for young people from a contextual point of view. So we try and hit every element of that young person's behaviour to stop the problem becoming into greater ASB, and you know what, stop the problem coming into criminality and all of the nasty stuff we just don't not want to see people graduate into. So that's really what we do as a partnership, I think, in a nutshell, Chair. And that's probably answering what one and two of the first questions. So I can leave it there for the moment.
Any questions? Then check the what's name. I've got a couple, but I'll wait for you to go first.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, Mr. Day. Hey, Councillor McDay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks very much. Is it okay if I call you Mark?
Absolutely fine, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mark. It's a very full report and also very good with the summary that you provided. One particular issue I wanted to kind of explore a little bit was the relationship with schools. I was in a meeting yesterday with the Admissions Forum, and we were talking about exclusions either on a temporary or a permanent basis. And one of the comments that was made there was about the fact that they'd identified an increase in violent behaviour, either toward members of staff or pupils. And clearly, I think you referred to the impact that COVID has had on behaviour, but I just wondered if there was something that you could tell us a little bit about in terms of your interaction with schools and the work that you might be doing in schools. I know that you've got a schools unit. I know that they focus on things like dealing with the internet and so on, and anti-bullying, but I just wondered if you within your unit have specific contacts with schools, or whether there are particular hotspots that you've been called in to look at.
No, it's a topical question, I've got to be honest, because only recently we've brought, so that we've got six schools liaison officers that work throughout the borough. We recognise, and this is only in the literally last month or so, we recognise that we needed to bring them in from, because they tended to work from a kind of a headquarters central perspective with respect to the curriculum that they're given to deliver. And there's quite, from a Welsh national perspective, there's some strict control over that curriculum. And you are right, it's around cyberbullying, it's around exploitation, it's around knife crime. It's around drug awareness. There's a lot of stuff in there about the worries of drug and alcohol. It's around sex education to a certain extent. It's around bullying and exploitation. So that the curriculum is really quite full. And they deliver the set lessons in liaison with the head teachers throughout the school year. But I think the reason why I'm saying that is that we brought them under my command, which is within community safety, and that's only happened in the last month because we recognised that we needed to join them into the narrative that is going on locally. And I'm not saying for 1 minute they weren't into this from their local perspective, but we can see from where I'm sat that, well, hang on a minute, we've had a couple of instances over here in this school where we recognise that youths have brought in knives to that school. What's our response to that? What's the preventative response to that? What's the partnership response to that? And to make sure that we're all joined up in our response to that particular issue. And I actually think the schools liaison officers and the work they do is absolutely invaluable. And there was a time where we kind of put them onto other duties or gave them other responsibilities, where what we're saying now is, no, your time in that school is invaluable. You look after the curriculum, but you will also be the single point of contact for any issues to do with, I mean, unfortunately, young people, become vulnerable at a certain age, vulnerable to exploitation. And there's some really important and challenging work that needs to continue around suicide prevention, suicide awareness, and all of that side of it, that the schools liaison officer have to focus on in addition to their curriculum. So I think, and that's only recently happened as reorganising ourselves to that extent. And I think we recognise now that, well, we have recognised for many years that is really impacted. In Blind and Mice, I worked up in Blind and Mice a few years ago, had a lot to do with the primary school there. And the PCSOs openly said to me, because they'd established really good relationships with the kids, when the children then grew up and the PCSOs were still in the school, still walking around Blind and Mice police station, the youngsters who we would now attribute antisocial behaviour to or negativity towards were treating the PCSOs with a level of respect that you probably wouldn't expect them to treat them with respect, just because they personalised them within the school and they know that actually that PCSO has invested their time in them as a child, and that has a real impact out in the community. So it's invaluable. So I welcome the question, and I think that we can only go from strength to strength with that area of business. And I would welcome more kind of investment in there going forward in the next couple of years. But yeah, so it's a nice change that we've done.
Thanks, Mark. That's really encouraging, and I think the idea of agencies and organisations working together to deal with this, and I think, as we've said previously, our main concern would be to try and see what we could do to prevent it, an early intervention. So that's really helpful. Thanks, Mark.
And yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It was interesting, Mark, to hear you say that investment is something that could be done with early intervention. I just wondered where there might be other areas that might cause you some frustration, perhaps with other organisations where there aren't the facilities for young people to be perhaps more positively engaged. I'm fortunate to live by one of Swansea's largest parks, and our young people tend to congregate in that park, probably not doing a huge amount of bad stuff, but it tends to be then low-level theft, because they go and they take people's benches and they take people's picnic tables and they make themselves a little den in the park where they all go to meet. But that's because they haven't got anywhere else to meet. And then, so whilst they're there, and of course, then we've got the issue with the little capsules of laughing gas. So they're obviously sitting there having a great time, but again, because they've got nowhere else to go to. We do have places within Swansea, but they're so spread about that it's difficult for people to actually get to them. And I wonder, with the 70% of young people that you said don't actually get to the final end, what have been the issues with the other 70% that you've been able to sort of counteract them, basically? And as I say, if there were other facilities, would you not have had that 70% in the first place?
Again, it's a good question. But we've got to accept, don't we, that in every statutory organisation, there's finite resources to do finite a number of things. There's a finite resources to put facilities into places where they exist. There's also, for me, a question for statutory partners and others. There's a lot of good work that goes on unnoticed around outreach work, which is people on the ground. So the answer may not be the provision of another youth centre. And I get your point, and if we probably would want, if we could wage a magic wand, we want a number of things to happen, but that takes a lot of money to do that, and a lot of people to come together to do it. But I'd be saying that I think a lot of stuff that we don't see does happen with the children from a partnership perspective. But I get your point about the parks, and it's always, since day one, isn't it? Parks have been an issue because that's where children congregate to. And I think the answer lies within, some of the answer does lie partly in some of the community coming together from a and I kind of, I forget the posh phrase people use for this, but there's ways and means of the children and the young people owning the solution to that problem with good meaning people in the community, with the assistance of the third and first sector. Did you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than relying on the provision that we've only got a finite amount of resources that we can deliver. So I think that would be my answer to that question. We've seen spikes in areas of Swansea seasonally, and we've seen damage in parks. We've seen theft, and I think we can only do much from a prevention point of view. But the neighbourhood policing teams who work within them areas have problem-solving groups that they sit on, and they do a number of different things from a problem. So they analyse the problem, and there's a number of options that sit outside the problem. There may not be the provision of youth facilities. It may be around contextual safeguarding and diversion and understanding who the children are, and going into the antisocial behaviour process and visiting their parents that may help us, just curb some of that behaviour. So I think the answer would be no. It's a mixture of interventions. As long as we're confident that we're doing as much as we can possibly do with the partners that we've got to do that. And the answer isn't closing the parks, obviously, is it? The answer is not closing the parks.
No.
Or removing the benches, which we kind of where we were like 20 years ago. We target hardened things to the nth degree, and that's probably not the answer. The answer is to really work on young people and behaviour.
The way I look at it is, if you know where they are, well, you know where they are, and you can keep an eye on them. But
Yeah.
That's probably not the right thing to say.
Thanks, Chair. That's absolutely the right thing to say. I would say, if you know where they are, that creates safety. What young people tell us in Child and Family, picking up on Mark's point, is what they're looking for is somewhere light, somewhere to sit down, somewhere they can be with their mates. And I think that, and things like youth shelters are really good for doing that. They can be next to parks, they could be in different places other than parks, but it's where young people are more likely to feel that they're going to go to, rather than acquiring things to sit on from other places that maybe they shouldn't. So I think there are opportunities, and I'm a great believer in community action, and there are things that communities can do together with their young people. And for me, sometimes it's about understanding what may lie behind that young person's behaviour, rather than jumping to think about issuing a warning or going down the criminal route, because there will be something that will help that young person. And sometimes just the community being interested, i.e. the older people being interested in them as a young person, rather than feeling as though they're not welcome in that part because they're over 12, for example. So I think there are opportunities for us to strengthen our community work together. That doesn't, as Mark said, necessarily mean we need statutory partners to be forever putting in resources to continue that work, because they are the citizens of the future and the voters of the future. So the more we can engage them positively, the better, really. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could I just say, now when you mentioned they gather around a light, first thing that came into my mind was many years ago they used to label the children who hang around where the lights are as moth children or moth youth people. Not a very nice thing. I didn't like it at the time. I still don't like it, but I can understand when you come on the lights, and we got to have the lights, but at the same time, if they haven't got anywhere to go, there is plenty of places to go in some of the wards. I'm aware of that, not just in my ward, but other wards as well. And I think sometimes people are too quick to look at the young people and the bad stuff that's going on, but they don't want to look at the good stuff that's going on with the sports and the gymnastics and everything that goes on, the majorette bands. So, you know, I'm a big believer in that.
Just a comment, I think, Mark, the fact that I think you've only got, is it just 12 PCSOs in Swansea itself and 6 PCs? So you've got a fairly challenging time, really, with such few in terms of addressing sort of antisocial behaviour and other sorts of criminality that takes place.
I think you're quoting the neighbourhood teams there.
The city council, Swansea, yeah.
No, because you've got, I mean, I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, unfortunately, but we've got, obviously we've got response. So we split ourselves into two. The policing in Swansea split itself into two, just to explain this. So the initial response is now sitting over here, kind of by itself, and that's got a vast number of response officers within the BCU who respond to a vast number of calls that are generated for ASB, that are the critical end of what we do, but also the raft in between all of that. So there are a lot of police officers in and out of Swansea responding to them calls. The team you're probably referring to is a neighbourhood policing team, which is made up of probably 12 to 15 PCSOs, with a number of neighbourhood beat managers whose only job is to look after problem solving within Swansea city centre. So they'll take in the beachfront, but they because we split ourselves into response and now problem solving in neighbourhood, it's allowed us for the neighbourhood teams to concentrate 100% of their time on solving problems out there, which is a really good thing that we've done in the last year and a half. If we previously, when we did that before, what would happen is the neighbourhood teams would get sucked into this side of the business a bit, because our demand is so much. Our demand has increased so much in the last 5 to 10 years with technology, with people expecting more from us, as you'd expect with any big service. We've now tried our best to say, no, hang on a minute, because the demand that's generating over here is the solution that sits over here. Do you see? It is the children in the park, isn't it? It is the kids on the beachfront. It is some of the the long time problems that need to be solved. So we understand the solution to that problem, so we can then stop the demand hitting the police officers. So I think that's probably what you're referring to. I'm not saying it's not a challenge. It is a challenge. Of course, it is. I think if you were to spend a shift with some of the chaps and ladies over here, you'll see that it is a real grueling, to 2023. I joined in 1995. We're now in 2023. The job that I had in 1995 doesn't look the same as it does in 2023. And the demand on these young people, which they are themselves, is grueling. But at the same time, we've got some clever people sitting over here who work on what we term as OSARA, problem solving. They call them POPs now, but it's basically just an idea of how we solve a problem quickly, if we can, with partnerships and intervention. And that's where we're pushing a lot of our work. There's a whole team of PCSOs who sit and work with the local authority on early help. And their basic job is to look at vulnerability and incidents that are referred to us that relate to family or relate to alcohol misuse or relate to even drug taking, and link straight into the local authority and work together with them on the ground to solve some of them problems. So we've really flicked some of our resources, if you like, into the beginning of the issue rather than the end. I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was the kind of point that I was going to make, is that the teams are, from what I think the general public think, is that the work is sort of reactive rather than proactive, but I take on board what you're saying there now. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think everybody's perception of the police service is me, or is a police officer, isn't it? Where where we are now in 2023 is a whole area of police family, which includes PCSOs. And the PCSOs, when directed, a lot of them have got some really good initiative off their own back. We shouldn't be, I don't say we are devaluing it, but we should recognise that that is probably the future problem solving and contacts. And there's we've got a lot of PCSOs, we've had a lot of uplift from Welsh Government, and that's where the neighbourhood teams are sitting in the work that they do, which I think is invaluable and can only improve, to be honest.
Yeah, just to add on to that, so every area has their own designated PCSOs, which you should be having regular contact with, and they'll be proactive in our communities. So they'll engage with events, with anybody, as Mark just pointed out, is vulnerable. We can direct them as well. So there are a full complement of PCSOs now. There is a team available to you when you need them.
Yeah, could I just add to that? I was about reactive, proactive. It seems to be now in the first meeting we had here was council officers telling us, Swansea council officers telling us that they are targeting very young people. The older ones, I think they've just let them go. So they target them at a very young age, between, say, I think it's 8 and 12. And every week, where you mentioned Blind and Mice, on a Tuesday night, the police and all the partners turn up, and about 40 to 50 of these young people. So I think that's proactive myself. It's working, but at the same time, we still got the older ones who are still causing that bother. You know what I mean? And, you know, I think I don't know what his title is, but I call him Simon Trick, is officer up with us, and just declared an interest to play football for his grandfather. And they're doing a very, very good job. But as I said from the other day, we said round the corner, when this is finished, you should get the older ones coming up, and all sorts are going on. Police are aware of it, and when they've got issues, they get in touch. If they council tenants or housing association, they contact that same night. An email or report was into the district housing office saying that they had to deal with this person or that person, which it works. Whether all the organisations are working together, I don't know. Councillor Fogarty.
Thanks, Mark, and for your summary. Things, if that's okay, to just run through. Firstly,
there's no sound.
Why is there no sound? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Right, okay. I'm not sure whether I can hear you, but I'll put my headphones back in to be able to hear you. So yeah, just a couple of things. Thank you for the report and for the summary. From my interpretation of the report, it's very youth centric. And I think it's really encouraging that the results of early intervention are what they are. That looks fantastic. But I just wanted to get some clarity really around, not clear from the data that's in the report about whether the focus on youth is because the majority of referrals are relating to youth, or whether there's a particular approach to youth that is distinct from approach to adult antisocial behaviour. So I just wondered whether you could speak a little bit more about that. In my ward, quite a lot of the antisocial behaviour that I get told about is in that individual category that you outline in your context section, and it's predominantly neighbour to neighbour, and it's really difficult to manage because they live right next to each other. And I just wanted to kind of point out really the question that's asked around the feedback to victims is really essential, because when people report and they don't feel that they get adequate feedback about action that's been taken, they then are dissuaded from reporting again. And I've had people who I've said, you know, this is probably a police matter, you need to report it, given them all the channels, etc. And they've sort of said, oh, you know, I didn't get a response last time, so I'm reluctant. And I think that's particularly acute when it's neighbour to neighbour, because there's also a kind of fear of intimidation as well. So if you're taking a risk to report and then you don't feel that you're getting the feedback, it's even less likely that you're going to report again. So I just wanted to ask really kind of, are there any barriers that you're facing, whether it be resourcing, capacity, etc., to, for that feedback element of the role, because I think it is just really, really important in maintaining those relationships with residents to ensure that you're getting reports in a timely fashion and in a way that you can actually then respond and take action.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. I think we'll answer the adult thing second. I'll answer the second thing first, I think, while it's in my head. Neighbourhood disputes are, I don't know, this is probably a personal view. We seem to have brought this back to fruition from, post-COVID, where people were locked in their houses and people weren't getting on with each other. And we've seen a little bit of an increase from our perspective around quite debilitating and long-standing neighbour disputes. And we can only do so much. Let's be honest, we can only do so much. Where criminal offences are not apparent, where there's antisocial behaviour, we can act on that. But we enter into mediation a lot with individuals, particularly some hard, long-standing cases where we've gone to mediation. I was involved in one directly a couple of years ago with the most long-standing dispute probably ever in South Wales Police history, which is unfortunately is local to this BCU. And they're really challenging for the cops and the officers and the PCSOs who deal with them, because you've got people in entrenched positions. It's very rarely we see. It does occur. Obviously, it does occur, but we tend to see people sitting in entrenched positions on neighbour disputes. The point you make about victim contact is also really important to us. We've done a lot of studies, the force has, around how good we are at our initial contact. Our initial contact and our initial response is pretty good, and people feel confident in what we do and how we then interact with them. Our Achilles heel to a point is your point, which is the follow-up contact, not just on antisocial behaviour, but on crime and criminality and all of that. And we've put in recent months, in fact, it's one of the critical areas of our business now around officers and staff. I won't bore you with the processes we put in place internally, but we have almost mandated and put a real stern scrutiny and process around what we call victim coding, which means you have updated the victim after a certain amount of time on an investigation or an antisocial behaviour issue, because we very much recognise with yourselves that we lose confidence in the public if we don't enter into that contact and maintain it. And so this is about us really understanding how people want to be dealt with, and like yourself, like any private body, like any customer, like people you deal with privately, any retail outlet, if you get contacted out of the blue and told about the process of your order, you're chuffed. If you hear nothing at all for days and weeks on end, you're not chuffed, and in fact you then begin to have a negative view of that company. So we've recognised with that, and I think, hark back to my earlier conversation, it's a challenge with the cops that we've got responding and the shift patterns that they work that don't necessarily jump to regular updates of victims as much as we want to do. But trust me, there's a victim update board that sits within South Wales Police, and that has got some real local scrutiny down here through Declan, would you believe, which is looking at our victim update records and performance, because we recognise and to be honest, sometimes we simply do not get it right, and I think there's a recognition from us that challenge remains for us to do so. But neighbourhood disputes as a problem, that's a real struggle for us, but we have had some success stories, but the answer generally tends to lie with the individuals themselves to the solution to that problem. That's where it tends to lie. And there's some intransigence in them not acting on that. So that's the second bit first.
Before you move on to the next bit, could I just ask whether you think there's anything that's driving that increase in neighbourhood disputes?
I've got no data to back it up. There's a general feel that I think coming out of COVID, I mean, if you remember in COVID, we had instances, didn't we, around COVID regulations where neighbours would be, telling whoever need to be told about breaches of regulations, and I think because we've come out of that, there's if there were some elements within that period of hostility and ill at ease with your neighbours, it's just kind of generated some issue. But we do seem to see, and I haven't got the data to hand, but I just know from the conversations I have that that quite a bit of our work, particularly within my first close team, which was in the community safety team in Neath, is talking about we need to go to mediation with this, and we need to go to mediation with that. And we've tried everything else, and we've failed. And we do go to behaviour contracts with neighbours as well, and they do have some success. But I think, like I said to you before, that the solution tends to lie within the people who are in that particular problem. And do you know what? It's a quality of life issue, and it's horrendous when you're in it. And we try our best to provide every solution we can without going through, formal process, if that makes sense. Does it?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So yeah,
Councillor Alison Pugh.
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Sorry, I thought he'd finished.
Okay.
No, adult stuff. Yeah, you're right. The focus of the report looks at youth primarily. The same processes are in play for adults. Absolutely, 100%. There's no different in the process that we do. And I think, Hayley, do you want to just run through some of the stats? Will that be of help to you? Or just some brief overview of the stats for you, which talks about process.
Yeah, so in 2002, we're looking at there was 65 first stage 1 warning letters issued to adults. Out of those then that progressed up through using legislation, we're looking at 8 that have been issued a community protection warning, which would have prohibitions or requirements from them to stop doing certain behaviours or do certain behaviours to basically address the unacceptable behaviour and look at putting support mechanisms in place for those that required those support. And then we only actually progressed to 1 criminal behaviour order in Swansea issued last year. So it's like with the youth stats, it's showing that early intervention is effective. As we move up those stages and start using our powers, the number of individuals involved are less. And the individuals that do escalate up to these stages tend to have more deep-rooted issues, vulnerabilities which require specific support and sufficient time for them to be addressed and for that change to be made. And enforcement is always a last option for us. We will put everything in place and give them the opportunities to change themselves and put that support mechanisms in place. With regards to adults as well, I suppose, again, the focus being on youths and our numbers being higher with youths is that we tend to get a lot more group related ASB with young people, therefore the numbers are higher. We also deal with a lot of issues through the ASB process as a way of keeping those individuals out of the criminal justice system. So the ASB process is applied more predominantly to young people, where we might have other options then for the adults. I just wanted to put some context and clarity as well around the stage intervention and the warning letter process. It's not applied as like an arbitrary response. It's not that this instance happened and therefore they will get a warning letter. Particularly with the young people as well, we'll have conversations with them, discuss, is there a root problem? Is there a cause for their behaviour being the way it is? With the groups as well, we'll give words of advice. It's not always a warning letter, but if a warning letter is deemed appropriate and that level of intervention is required, then obviously that's what we will do. When we are then progressing up the stage, again, the young people involved at our stage 2, where we're having those meetings, again, a majority of those tend to be the ones maybe have had care homes, have got problems at home. There's a much wider context around why their behaviour is the way it is and needs that those discussions with them to try to find out how can we support and help them. And that's, again, when we put those support mechanisms in place, that's how we get a drop off. I think a lot of times there are certain individuals where we know that despite offering this intervention, it's not going to have the desired effect, and maybe the more punitive measures is what they need to be able to manage their behaviour. We get a lot of them who, whilst some of the contracts are voluntary, they'll ask for certain conditions because it gives them a boundary and that's what they need. But again, we can't identify those needs unless we have those conversations with them. Sorry, I know I digress slightly from the adult side, but I just wanted to provide some context around the warning letter system. Is there anything else? Thank you.
Sorry, Alison Pugh next, please, because she's a cabinet member for communities as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in 2 things, please. following on from what Mark was saying then, and Rebecca with the neighbour disputes, and I'm sure it's actually my ward that Mark is talking about. We have two gentlemen that has been going on for a long time and taking up many hours of the police service. Do you know what I mean? And everybody involved, and I don't know if there'll ever be an happy ending there. Do you know what I mean? But and Rebecca is right. It's very, very difficult neighbour disputes. Neither want to back down. Neither wants to apologise. You know, it is, and I think it's hard. It's hard for everybody. But in regards to Chair, you said about the officers, because we've obviously been in the council officers in the last couple of sessions, you know, and we said about, you say about us concentrating more on the younger children and not on the older. I don't think that is really what we were trying to say. What we were trying to say is very much like what Hayley was just saying, that you can get a lot of success the earlier you are in an intervention, the younger the child is. As Hayley just said, sometimes as you go on a bit, there's far more complex issues by the time they're getting a bit older. But what I'd like to stress is the partnership work, because it isn't just for us, it isn't just for the police, it's you know, from the youth workers, the contextual safeguarding, third sector, everybody that could be, probation, everybody could be involved, and it's the right intervention at the right time for people, you know. So it's not that we don't work with the older children or the others. Gareth will manage that situation and work with the right people and make sure, like you commented, if it is a housing tenant or you know, the right place. So just to reassure you, we don't only try and deal with the little ones, we do deal with everybody.
Okay, I was going to add to that, if anybody ever wants to come up to see what they're doing with the very young people in Blind and Mice and Portmead, they're more than welcome. There's usually 40 to 60 young children there. I do agree with what Alison was saying to a certain degree, but you've got to start somewhere. I'm not saying they wash their hands with the older ones, but they are more difficult to get out of. But at the moment, that particular project is working. How long it will last, I don't know. One of the questions I would like to know, and this have come from other councillors as well, is would you know what are the priorities of the police are for, say, 23 and 24? Because some of the councillors have said to me that they tried to contact the police and they feel that because it's not a priority of the police, you know, they feel left out of it.
Well, it depends what you're asking. We work to two basic plans as a police service in South Wales. One is the Chief Constable's Delivery Plan. The other one is the Commissioner's Plan. And they both dovetail really. Now, in the Chief Constable's Delivery Plan, it goes into a lot of areas around people, partnerships, business and strategy around what we're doing as an organisation, right? But what it says in that plan is that we've got to react to what the communities see as problems in their local communities. So if there is, let's get it down to right granular level. Let's talk about off-road biking in Penderry. Now, off-road biking in Penderry and in Penlan and that type of area is a key issue for the community, isn't it? It's a seasonal issue for the community, and it's there as something that we know causes quality of life issues. For that sector inspector sitting on top of that area, that is a priority for him because it sits within his problem solving group for them to understand how to change that as a problem. So even though it's not written at the top of a Chief Constable's delivery plan, what the Chief Constable expectation on us is to improve quality of life issues and problem solve from the outset for people in the community. I could give you a list of areas where we focus, which is sitting around organised criminality, sitting around drug misuse, sits around terrorism and prevent issues for contest and how we deal with our youth for stuff that has international context as well. And obviously around domestic violence and sexual offences and violence against women and girls, which is really something that we're very focused on now. So but what I'm trying to say to you is that we would not, quality of life issues, stuff that matters to people day in, day out, that that you think as a councillor with a partnership response can have an influence on, that's our business, isn't it? And because it's not written on a priority somewhere, but that's our business. And what I'd say to you, problem solving and quality of life is a priority for the police service together with its partners
Across the board.
Across the board. So I think I've explained that as best I can, but it is not something. It's the basis of policing, isn't it? Policing is policing by consent and doing the job with the partnerships around safer communities. That's our priority.
If that, because now I can go back to the local councils and say, I've asked the question and this is the issue.
Just to add to that as well, obviously the priorities are regularly reviewed. So what might be a priority one month might not necessarily next be your top priority the next month. So we review them as the community is changing and as the community, what the community response is required and what the police feel is needed in that area. Those priorities will change as well as necessary.
I'd respond to that. Any other questions?
What do you want me to do now? Sorry.
I wouldn't want you to do it for all the questions.
No, I won't. I'm assuming.
And I am aware that at 5 o'clock, all the councillors were here, and that they will be down here we've got full council at 5 o'clock as well.
Yeah, I could talk to you for 2 hours. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll jump. I don't want to. I'm not going to read the report to you because that will send everybody to sleep. I think what I'll probably talk about very briefly is I'll do 2 other things I think for you. One, I'll talk about some of the challenges that I think we've got, and I'll also talk about some of the engagement issues as well. So I think I'll do that. If there's anything burning that you want me to comment on from an ASP perspective, then just ask, even if it's outside the content of the report. The report was just a starter for 10, really. So I think the first thing, I think some of the challenges we've got, there's a couple of internal challenges from a South Wales Police perspective. Because we do get inspected. That's the other thing to mention is that not only do internally we get inspected on our business, we also have a separate entity within South Wales Police that sends out victim satisfaction questionnaires. So we try and close the loop, not only on our internal business around our processes, but also around how does the public think we are dealing with certain things. And there's a number of ways we do that. But myself and Hayley then, and all the teams in South Wales Police area then look at specific instances that people have not felt they've had the service that they need with respect to antisocial behaviour. So the team will send out the questionnaires from headquarters, and we'll look into the detail behind that, and we will learn from some of the instances that we haven't dealt with particularly well. So there's a feedback loop there externally. Internally, there's also a feedback loop around what we do. And I'll just give you a flavour of some of the bits that we recognise we need to progress further. One is around repeat victim identification, which we run a system locally and throughout South Wales Police where we identify repeat victims. We're worried. This is the thing about antisocial behaviour now. We've been talking for 45 minutes on youth ASB a little bit and adult stuff. We know that ASB is a precursor to, if it's not stopped early, to serious things that happen. And we've seen it throughout history with the Pilkington case, which is now probably 25 years ago, isn't it, or so, something like that. So we know that this is also, even though it's something that we do around prevention and intervention, we also know that if we don't intervene and stuff continues, stuff can get iffy for people in the community. So our job here is to make sure that we identify some of them cases which we think have the potential to go to that. So we've got to stop them in their tracks. So the way we do that is around repeat victim processes, which is 3 incidents in 3 months. What we've recognised as a business, and and even with the partnership with our local authority colleagues, is that definition's a bit arbitrary, because we know that the context says a whole lot different sometimes. So act within it and act outside of it as well. And that's one of the challenges that we put within. It's not just Swansea I'm talking about now, it's all of the police service. So that was one of the things we picked up on internally. And the other bit is around crimes being stuck in antisocial behaviour or classed wrongly as antisocial behaviour. So internally, we've got to look at how we ensure that we focus on the criminality when it's there, and also the antisocial behaviour, and also looking at problem solving for repeat victims and putting more effort behind there. What we did say as a partnership, though, what we did recognise, and it's actually in the report. I didn't put a page. Oh yeah, page 4 at the bottom of page 4. It talks about that we probably need to get to a position at some time in the next 2 to 3 years, or even sooner, where the local authority and ourselves can embark on some of the hard end of CBOs and business. Because at the moment, the police seem to be best placed to do that, when actually the capability lies within the local authority as well. So that what I'm saying there is that there's probably scope for us to widen as a partnership who does what and when. Does that make sense? So them are some of the challenges that we've got internally and externally there. I think the other bit, I just want to mention the other bit, which is, and I've lost it on the sheet, but there we go, it's in my head. The other bit I think we need to improve on as a service and from a partnership perspective is, I don't know how many years did the community trigger exist for? Was it 4 years now? 8 years. So nationally, the community trigger was launched. And what the community trigger was, it's now called the Antisocial Behaviour Case Review. It was a way that members of public could put up their hand and go, "Oi, this has not been dealt with correctly. I need, as a partnership, for the statutory partners to sit around the table and review what's happened to me." And I think it was owned by the Commissioner's Office initially from respect of profile and advertisement. And I think there's more work to do to put that out to the general public, to actually hold elements of us to account on certain areas where we have not done what we should have done at a certain time. So there's a bit more work there for us to do. And lumped onto, so that's one bit of saying that this exists. If the criteria is met for this to review, then we will review it as a partnership. And we've done, I haven't got the figures, but we've done quite a few force-wide now, haven't we? I think, yeah, go on then.
So just to add with the community trigger, or as known as the ASB case review, same process. Across the South Wales Force area, we actually have one of the lowest figures of applicants nationally, well, across England and Wales. Part of that is down to the very good partnership working and relationships that we have, the problem solving and all this early intervention that we put in place. But there's a potential that part of that low figure might be as well down to the fact that it isn't as widely promoted as perhaps it could be. We do get a lot of our applications actually are not antisocial behaviour as well. They're used by a lot of individuals as another way for them to get their voice heard, and it's for us to manage those expectations. So with the promotion of the tool for the community and for victims, also has to have that expectation of what it actually is and the realistic outcome of what the police and partners can do. It's not a complaints procedure. It's not looking at any sort of disciplinary within the force. It's purely to see, are there any gaps in what police could have done, looking at it from a fresh perspective with independent representatives as well. Was there something we missed that could have been done? But also inviting that victim into those like a pre-meet before the panel hearing to ask them what is it that they want, what resolution are they looking for, and then saying to them, right, this is part that does not come under this process. It's something that police and partners are not able to achieve for you, but this is what we can do for you, and then go forward from there.
Yeah, so there's certain elements then of what we've seen internally and externally, we probably need to put more effort behind, or just profile a bit better in the community. So what we talked about there is the community trigger, the antisocial behaviour case review, and we talked about the ability to feedback intern and external around victim satisfaction surveys. So I don't know if there's any questions on that at all.
I just wanted to add, really, because I've looked at these questions, obviously, and part of my role is to develop and strengthen relationships, especially between ward members and the local policing teams. And that's to pick up on incidents. I mean, we know ward members are embedded in our communities and we pick up on things that perhaps people aren't willing to disclose to the police. And by doing that, we're preventing that escalation and avoiding incidents and further harm to our community, our residents. And I know that the expectation on particularly PCSOs is that they've got that presence in our communities, that they visit our libraries, they attend our community events, you know, from Kickabout with a Copper or summer of fun activities, and develop relationships with our young people and our adults. And I've been out on an op perception and with the police and spoken to residents, and I'd recommend that anybody else, if they've got that opportunity to do that. I know that there's another, touching on what we mentioned before, there is an expectations on our PCSOs to visit victims of harm or victims of incidents, to follow up on that as well, to reassure and to give confidence to our communities so that they've got that sense that they are safe, and that they are protected as well. So I just wanted to add that, really. Thank you for allowing me to go before you.
Mine was, it's sort of similar to that. It's perhaps an example where I'm just wondering, because maybe informally agencies have come together because there's been a victim, and it's generally, if I can give this, I'm working on the third one in Scrutiny now, where there's been a number of people who've been affected by one individual, and what we've done is work with housing, with the community police officers and police sergeants, and also members of our ASB section as well, where they will all come, because sometimes victims want to say what it is that's actually hurting. And when they get the opportunity and they can see that there's a multi-organisational support there, it helps them to not overcome the challenges that they've had, but at least they know that people are listening. So I say that's what we're doing to one person at a time. As I say, it's unfortunate that the three we've had have been a number of people affected by one person. But then, as Hayley said, it's the expectation then, what do people want out of it? And invariably, it is they want an individual moved from the block of flats that they're living in. Now, we then come into the housing regulations and what you can actually do to actually terminate people's tenancies. And that is becoming more and more difficult. And for example, even now where people, we'll go into too much detail because it might become obvious, but even if people have had a custodial sentence, that generally used to be able to trigger the fact that a tenancy would end. But now the perpetrator is being advised not to terminate their tenancy, because it does mean that because they'd be homeless when they come out of custody, that they've then got somewhere to go back to. So for the victims, they never have peace because they know that the issues are going to start again. So, you know, and that is a very difficult, that's a very difficult expectation then to try and sort out. So as I say, for the organisations involved, there's a lot of issues going on, which I feel is a challenge that sometimes where it should be quite clear that it isn't clear. And obviously for the individual who might be in custody, they do need somewhere to live when they come out of custody. So we've got this sort of like, you've got the victims, but the perpetrator becomes a victim themselves at some point in the future. So it's really quite difficult. But I have found that getting those organisations together to talk to a group of people has been really, really helpful. And I don't know if that's something that anybody else, you know, if I can just pass that on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a challenge, obviously. And when you look in the example you gave there, we would look at our housing partners, look at what powers and tools that they've got to be able to manage that tenancy whilst it's in place. When it comes to private, we get more of a struggle. And yeah, does tend to fall onto police then, or police and the local authority to try and find the resolutions there. But for anybody who becomes a repeat victim, whether that's because there's been that 3 recognised incidents in a 3-month period, or other factors that we recognise as being a trigger for that individual, they'll all be subject to risk assessments. So even if it's 1 individual or 3 individuals that are affected by one particular perpetrator, they'll all have individual risk assessments, which will identify their needs, and they'll all then be subject to a bespoke action plan fit for purpose for that individual. Some may run short term, some may be long term. It is what does that victim need to be able to manage daily with the incidents that has happened, which are ongoing, etc. And within that action plan then is regular victim contact. So that is a police process that's in place. But with the action plan, it's not a police-led action plan. If the local authority are best situated to lead on that action plan, then we will hand over to our partners to do that.
And
that's another thing. If from a police side of things, if there's something that needs police,
we actually had a similar issue in Penland this last couple of weeks. Gentleman well known, I can't obviously no names forever, and my understanding is a notice of intent to seek possession is in the offering. And as for the private tenants, I said in our last meeting, I'll always say it. People say it's difficult. I don't see how it's difficult, because under the Environmental Protection Act, we don't challenge the tenant, we challenge the landlord. And if the landlord do not act under the Environmental Protection Act, then we can deal with that landlord.
so that then that's
Because they do think the private tenants that they're untouchable, don't they?
Absolutely. So that's passing back then with the local authority, and what we said, well, one of our challenges being that the scope to then use the powers and tools available, because that wouldn't, obviously, if it's environmental and health matter, it wouldn't sit with policing then to lead on that. The challenges of that.
To the council.
Yeah, absolutely. For them to look at what powers and tools they've got to.
So if they was going down that line of eviction or whatever, those reports and the council officers.
What we're saying is that there's just more powers and tools available when we've got more partners who are able to apply those tools. So if they are a registered social landlord, we've got the housing powers to fall on to, as well as our policing and local authority powers. So it just gives us more scope to look at sort of a bigger toolkit then to use to what's most appropriate to deal with that scenario.
Councillor Alan Jeffries, I'll fetch you in next because the gentleman's been waiting. Okay. And I'll fetch you in.
A bit of a surprise there, Terry, but I'll just make a kind of arbitrary point. A couple of moments ago, Chief Inspector, you mentioned that you could only do so much. I wonder, is that a question of the fact that you have a lack of resources in terms of lack of personnel and other resources that you could use to tackle these jobs? But just following on from what Councillor Haley was saying about reporting, I mean, would it be to our advantage to support the police in getting the message out that crime should be reported to you, to the police, rather than to us as councillors, so that I mean, it helps your statistics, I suppose, in the battle to improve the resources.
Well, just you made the resource issue now twice, haven't you? I think what I've said is every statutory partner is not an endless pit of resource. Every statutory partner is. And if you ask anybody within the fire service, the ambulance service, the local authority, they'd always say to you, yeah, more people it'd be better. But we recognise, don't we? We're in a particular situation where more people isn't going to happen. So you're efficient with the people that you've got, and we've extended our numbers from a neighbourhood policing team perspective quite radically in the last couple of years with respect to the PCSOs and the uplift. And you've probably seen, even in local media and social media, the fact that we're recruiting quite vehemently for police officers now. So we're not necessarily saying we're short staffed. I think the point I was trying to make is every statutory partner will say there's a limit to, because they can't be everything to everybody. That's the point I'm trying to make. And I think the other bit, the other key point around the role of a councillor, you're really vast wealth of information around everything in the areas that you represent, aren't you? I think our instruction, I sat on a couple of scrutiny committees last year and the year before, where certain councillors are saying, well, we need more contact. And our instructions to our sector inspectors and to their teams was, you maintain that really close contact with your councillors because they know so much. And I think that has grown since we made that instruction, and there's a lot more contact, a lot more closeness around some of the priorities that we need to be acting on, because you've got the look and the feel and the ideas of what people are saying to you. And it's a point I was going to make around engagement, actually. That we obviously, if we don't know a problem, we can't act upon it. And yet we recognise that there are many now different ways to report matters to South Wales Police. It's not just, obviously, it's not just on the 39s. It's not just via 101. It's via the DigiDesk. It's via Facebook Messenger. It's via email. There's lots of ways people can get to us. And I think our message would be, look at our sites, look at our press, and you'll see them ways and means and avenues of reporting, and we need to push that out as a message. It's not just 101, it's every other which way as well, and also through yourselves. If matters that are slow time that you need us to understand, we will react to that, obviously. So I think you're a valuable resource, and I wouldn't want to understate that.
I was just going to say, we fully appreciate everything that you do on the interaction with PCSOs as well.
Councillor Gwilym.
Yeah, I was only going to come back on what you mentioned, Cheryl, about people going into custody, and that triggers as well service intervention. So whether it's drug and alcohol or mental health, you know, that will initiate some sort of wraparound to the person that's been brought into custody.
Yeah. In my case, it was being quite selfish, because for the number of people that it's affecting, they're absolutely delighted that the chap has gone into custody. But he knew how to play the game, so he knew that he was being watched for his behaviour. So the custody issue was something totally, it was theft or whatever. But I think there was an assault as well. But you know, he would do things to antagonise people, but he'd know when to stop, and then he'd have a break. So for the residents, they were under this constant drip and tap all the time. When's it going to happen again? When's it going to happen again? So so that's a bit of an issue. And in fact, the other two cases have been the same. But you get the, you know, they get slap on their knuckles and it'd be right, okay, they'd be fine. But then it happens again. And of course, the perpetrator then gets used to the fact, oh, well, I'm only going to be good for a couple of months, and then, you know, I can, you know, so, and I thought that sounds really, really cynical, but sometimes that is just the way that things are. And it's managing that for the victims, because their quality of life is nil when these things are happening. And when you get people moving and wanting to move and desperate because of one person, then it just isn't fair, is it?
Did your colleague want to come in just now? Did you want to come? I missed. You're all right. Okay. But I do agree with Cheryl. You know, blocks of flats, one or two individuals, you know, they can cause really, really disruption. The council do give them many chances, because I believe the council policy is eviction is the last resort. But the council got to remember that we've all got the same tenancy agreement, tenancy conditions. And if someone is not having the peace and enjoyment of their home, they can actually challenge the City and County of Swansea, or any other landlord for that matter, the secure tenants, in court. I can understand where they're coming from regarding, you know, evictions, but at the same time, law-abiding people with peace and quiet of their own, peace and enjoyment of their homes. If they're not having it, I would advise them to take it to the City and County of Swansea and say, hey, we're not having the peace and enjoyment of our homes. We'd like to see something done about it. That way, it's not a big legal thing, because there's tenant conditions signed between the tenant and the City and County of Swansea. I can only advise on that, and that's what I tend to do.
Just a word of assurance for you. I mean, when I first came into this post, what was it? Grayson 5 so years ago. We set up regionally and throughout South Wales Police the information sharing agreement with the RSL, so the Registered Social Landlord. So we understand, we are completely like that, probably on a day-to-day basis, where we understand what's going on and the incidents that are reported locally. And in fairness to even some of the advocates, the Titarian and Pobble, the partnership working, I think is really positive because they're proactive in the areas, not just around the management and tenancy, but in the areas around problem solving and community work. And they put a lot of effort into understanding the police perspective, the local authority perspective, the youth perspective, the environment perspective, the quality of life issues. If I did this here, what impact would that have on the local town? Or so I think we've moved on a lot, and I think that is it was a bit of a surprise to me about how close and interested and invested Titarian, Pobble, and other housing bodies were in some of the stuff you wouldn't necessarily think they'd be invested in, if that makes sense. So I think that's a positive for us, and I get the issues you mentioned, and they're difficult to challenge.
Regarding Pobble, there's 600 of their properties on the estate where I live. I won't put too much into it, but I haven't got a lot of confidence, because instead of dealing with the issue, not necessarily antisocial people, they could be a lot more serious than that. They ask the tenants who complained to Pobble, do you want to move? Which is sad, really. It's what happens to good people want to move out, and then we left with whoever. And I'm not talking off the top of my head. I've been dealing with Pobble for about 25 years now. I still call them Gwalia, but they have a responsibility in our community because of the 600 properties and 400 in Clis. But we can only try.
No sound, Chair.
Yes, Alison.
No, I was saying there was no sound. We couldn't hear you.
All right, yeah. I turned my mic off, sorry. Back on now, you can hear me. Any other questions before we move on? Well, I think we could thank your attendance today. I hope that you will pass on about the good work that the councillors have been saying, that the good work the police in some areas have been, very, very good. The only thing that sticks in my mind is, I don't know what his title is now, but I used to call him Andy Kingdom. Yes, but I don't know what his. No, I don't know. I don't. He was a police constable when I knew him.
He retired as a superintendent in Bridget.
But the Merlin indeed. He took about 40 or 50 of us up to the Bridge End headquarters. And they did all sorts of displays, fantastic. Probably one of the best days I had out. And all the children, the kids from already, about 50 of us. It was one of the best days we had out. We always thanked him for that. And I was wondering if any of those sort of things are in the pipeline.
Well, they do. Well, you should come to the Force Open Day. The Force Open Day is all of that: horses, dogs, CSI investment. It's everything. So I think we have done in the past, private visits, but the Force Open Day is something that you'd want to attend, because we're on show for everything, and even the local Open Day that we did at the Phoenix Centre, was it last? I forget when it was raining horribly, and I knew that. It's horrendous weather, but yeah, I just avail yourself of them opportunities as best you can. And Andy Kingdom is retired, and he was a bit of a character, wasn't he? Bless him.
He was so well respected in our area, and because of the work he'd done, then he was a sergeant, and then he went up somewhere else. So, and we still talk about him up there, which I think is a great thing, And I got more information. I got more information at that event about the CPS up there, because I couldn't get it from their offices in York Street in Swansea. So thank you very much for attending, and no doubt we will be coming back to send you some of our reports, etc. And again, I would say, if you ever want to come to us in Blyndamice and Portmead, you're more than welcome. But Tuesday at 5 o'clock is about the best time. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Yes, we're planning.
Chair, are we free? We are free to go now, are we?
Not quite.
I can't hear you.
Not yet, Alison.
Okay. I can't hear Chair, sorry.
It's back on.
There's
Right
no
on.
sound coming from you.
I know, I'm miming. Like a lot of the officers down here. That's it. Ooh.
Okay, shall we just do the project plan? Yeah.
Yeah.
Last item's the project plan. So that's just we've got a few.
Hang on a minute. Once again, thank you very much. The next one is the project plan. Today, as the police, the next one would be education on the 27th of February at 10 o'clock. How are you about that? I'm sure Councillor Mike Day will look forward to that one because he's very much into the education.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did mention that the Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Committee would be looking forward to the information that they had being shared. So,
okay. Is there anything anybody would like to add to this? You know, because if issues come up, please contact us and we get things on the agenda.
For me, I think that session 5 with the council housing, neighbourhood support unit and the public protection services and you know, the environment, that encompasses much of what we've been talking about today, really. And it is what powers we do have to be able to manage expectations of antisocial behaviour, because that's it. It's all very well looking at it in black and white and saying, yeah, we've got all of this, we've got that. But in practice, it didn't always work. And that's the problem, that as councillors, it's the practice, it's what's happening, which is the frustration to us. And I'm sure to many officers as well, you know, that you think, right, we're now scuppered by some legal loophole or whatever. You know, it's difficult, isn't it? So it'd be interesting to see the challenges that we've got.
I couldn't agree more. You know, as councillors, we get it. You know, we're not 9 till 5 or 8 till 4. You know, we're there 24 hours a day, and no doubt yourselves, the fellow councillors, if knock comes on the door, I have got an open door policy which I've been told I got to change for security reasons. But I've always worked that way. I was chairman of the biggest tennis national organisation in this country, 100,000 members. But as the chairman, I had an open door policy. It works. If the car's in a drive, I say, knock the door, come here and have a chat and take it. And often you get some people will give you the information, but they don't want to take it themselves. And I says, give it to me and I'll take it forward. So there's no repercussions then on anybody else, you know. And we found that worked. We must have won a gold award many years ago for tackling antisocial behaviour in the blind and mice. Bit before your time, I should imagine, but I still keeps the stuff. Yeah. Thank you very much. With that, I don't think there's anything else. No. Thank you for your attendance. I can thank the cabinet member, Hayley, for we had an issue recently, and she contacted us up in Blind and Mice. Any support we needed, she put herself in our back to do that. So I'd like to thank you for that. And the same with Alison.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
thank you. Bye.